Welcome here to the Gamma Project. My name is Justin McGuire. We're back again once with Ben Cornish, all the way from
Bristol, UK.
Bristol.
Bristol.
Not cortisol, right? Bristol.
Yeah, that's it.
So we're here today. We're going to talk about topic of exercise selection and muscle growth and lagging body parts.
Yeah, that's right. Lagging body parts being my legs, quads, hams, and calves. Calves, I just don't feel motivated to train them because they're so pathetic. When I do, I can't really get great contraction. Quads, I feel like I made a few gains last year. 2017, I feel like I've made good progress on them, but they're still very poor. Hamstrings are non-existent also. So yeah, I'd love to get some hints and tips on how I can improve them in 2018.
Well, Ben, for many years, I was the epitome of an American weightlifter. And what I mean by that is for quite a few generations, if you went to an American gym, you see these guys with big upper bodies and these small little pencil legs. As much as I trained my legs, that was me. My legs started growing a lot when I started to incorporate stretching. But when I say stretching, I think a lot of people misunderstand as to what the intention is behind stretching. Simply just putting yourself in position and hoping the muscle will lengthen can sometimes be a bit futile. So increasing the range of movement to a particular structure through rotational means, so not just longitudinal means, but rotational means, will allow you to engage better contraction, because the body is generated through processes of torque. So we don't move in a linear fashion. We move in rotative fashion in order to create propulsion. Now, when there is a little bit of an obstruction to our capacity to create rotation, muscle contraction becomes a little bit diminished, or our proprioception to muscle control and contraction becomes diminished. And in particular, when it comes to the hamstrings and the calves, see, most people are quite dominant in the world because their pelvis is anteriorly tilted. And the reason why, not all the time, but for a big reason as to why the pelvis could be anteriorly tilted, is generally due to gastrointestinal issues. So if you think about the human body, where our organs sit, we have a rib cage and encapsulates our lungs, and our organs sit to the anterior part of our spine. So we have all the musculature on the back of the spine, which helps us to stay upright and erect, and then all our vital organs are in the front. Now, if you think about how a building structure would be held up, if there would be an element, say now this is our spine, and we have our organs here, and we have our extensors here, our spinal extensors here. If there is an element of distension here, so in other words, all the tissue that's around the front of our torso pushes our body in this position, we have issues of lordosis and issues of kyphosis coming through, right? Which means curvature of the thoracic spine or excessive curvature of the lumbar spine. And as anything occurs within the spinal column, it will have a cascade or a sequence effect to the pelvis as well. Because the body or the brain will orchestrate a response to allow the body to be as much balanced as it possibly can, so we don't fall over when we walk or when we're standing up. So what happens is when we become slightly distended in our gut or inflamed, and a person with a good six-pack doesn't necessarily mean they don't have inflammation going on inside the gut. Inflammation can really disassociate you from where you are, especially around the midsection and the gastrointestinal tract. So as soon as you start to have distension in any minor form, the pelvis will pull over. So if you think about the pelvis, this being the coccyx and this being the front of the pelvis, a nice neutral position of the pelvis may be there. As soon as the gastrointestinal tract becomes inflamed, we have this effect occurring. All right. So the back of the pelvis, or the PIS, becomes closer to the lower rib, which is why people have back pain or tight QLs, which switches off our gluteal fibers, particularly the glute medius, which helps us to abduct our hip during hip flexion or during extension phase of the movement. Now, when our pelvis is like in this angle, all the musculature that attaches to the front of the pelvis, in particular the rectus femoris, that comes through from the pelvis down to the knee, becomes shortened and becomes what we call hypertonic, which is a big fancy word for hyper, meaning excessive, and tonic, meaning toned. So excessively toned. So that muscle becomes tight and rigid, which means it can't stretch as well as what it should. It also means that you have a lot of impulses going to that muscle to keep its rigidity going. So that's why a lot of people have awareness to their quadriceps when they train their legs, but not so much awareness to the hamstrings or to the calves, because the position of the pelvis has caused distension of one part of the musculature on the back of the thigh, or the back of the pelvis, and overactive or facilitated activity on the front of the thigh. Mm-hmm. Now, the problem with this is if there is overactivity on the front of the thigh, we start to walk on our toes. We actually don't really drop the heel into a phase of dorsiflexion and then move off into a phase of plantar flexion. So basically, we do this. And then eventually our calves become tight, and all the flexors in our toes become hypertonic as well. And we start to do this with the ankle. So the ankle starts to turn in. So you see people with flat-footed or excessive amounts of pronation going on in the ankle itself. Yeah. And that causes us to become disaware of the calves because the toes start to grip on. So have you ever seen it, like as people get older, and generally if you look at somebody that has poor mechanics, so it might be a big guy with great muscular tone, but it might be a bit more restricted in their range of motion. If you look at their toes, the toes aren't relaxed. They're always in a state of semi-contraction. All right? I'm sure, have you seen that before, Ben?
I haven't looked for it. You know, I probably have without noticing, but I will look for it now.
Well, if you take your socks off now and you look at your foot, yeah. Notice how your toes are. Are they relaxed and extended, or is there an element of a bit of a bend in any of the tarsus?
Yeah, I mean, there's an element of a bend. They're not kind of extended and relaxed, I would say. There is not too bad.
Yeah, no, don't worry.
I'm not going to show you my feet.
I'm not going to put you that much on the spot. But that's a sign that the flexors of the toes are somewhat hypertonic, right? They're working harder than what they should. And if any element of a muscle that works in harmony with another muscle is working is excessively under strain, it's going to switch off the synergist or the accompanying muscle. And in this case, the calves. So ways in which we can try to benefit better proprioception is to do rotational stretches, things that will allow you to stretch the glutes. So sitting on the floor, bending the bottom knee to the side and bringing the other leg over, or contralateral stretches for the lats. Because just remember, the QLs in the back of the pelvis also become tonic, as well as the rectus femoris. So pelvis is here, rib cage is here. The muscles in the lower back, the deep muscles in the lower back, they become hypertonic because the pelvis is moving closer to the ribs. And then the muscles in the front of the thigh become hypertonic as well. So in order to release tension in these tissues, and must remember, in addition to these two tissues, a very big, large mass of muscle tissue under the glutes, the external rotators of the hip, also generally become facilitated, right? Yeah. So you'll see this when people start to walk out like a duck, right? Yeah. They don't roll in and roll out. They tend to walk stagger. Have you seen that in the gym? Right. Yeah. So that's generally a sign of very tight external rotators in the hip as well. Do you suffer from that, Ben? When you walk, do you find?
I think I do. I think when I'm standing, relaxed, I tend to stand slightly duck-footed, and it pisses me off. Excuse my French, but I don't like how it looks in other people, and I'm very conscious of it in myself. But yeah, I do see it a lot, and I think I probably am a little bit like that as well.
Well, a lot of people are, so you're not alone. I think most people are. It depends. I mean, normally the position of the foot would be at 5 degrees externally rotated. That's the anatomically neutral position of the foot. But from going from this position to this position, there's an excess amount of rotation going in the femur. Static external rotation, not active. So in order to alleviate these symptoms, the stretches which I showed you before on the email thread on on recovery days, those particular stretches are focused directly toward contralateral stretch of the lats, which open up the QLs, as well as rotational stretches for the deep fibers in our glutes. So these are going to help the pelvis to move better in and out of itself. And when we are able to control the femur as to how much it internally rotates and how actively it can, actively is the key word, externally rotates, we reduce the amount of torque going through to our knee. Because the knee as a joint is more of a stabilizing element than a mobilizing element when it comes to movement itself. All right, so generally we should be creating propulsion through activity in the hip. I'm not saying the knee doesn't have any involvement in mobilization, of course it does. But if you think about the gross responsibility it has, it's more for stability, so the femur can rotate and rotate out, not to cause the rotation itself, which is generally what happens when we become disassociated with our pelvis because it's too tight.
Right.
So those stretches that I gave you are so vitally important to do on recovery days, and to do for as long a period of a minute, sometimes up to 2 minutes, and really incorporate deep breath work with them too. Because the diaphragm is extremely important in its role in regulating full global motor response, right, to the rest of the body. Yeah, I'm sure you've become aware now that you've been on the program for a week and a half now, Ben, or was it a week?
About a week and a half, but properly on a week. I was still like getting prepped in the first few days, but yeah, it's been about a week today. My first video of you would have been my day one in my head, you know. I'd sort of just been dipping my toe in up until then.
You're looking so much better. I mean, your face is leaner, and your stomach, your pictures are really good. I mean, in a week's period, I'm really blown away. But probably what you've noticed now is that the body doesn't work in singularity. It works in a global fashion. So if something's not going on in one part of the body, it's going to have an effect on, even if you're trying to grow local muscles. So now you're trying to train your biceps, but your pectorals are so tight and your traps are so tight that during even this elbow flexion, the stability in the shoulder required to isolate pure bicep involvement, elbow flexion becomes diminished. So then you start to strain all the other tissue around it. You may strain the forearms, you may strain the tricep tendon, you may strain the brachialis underneath the bicep brachii, working harder than what it should. You may even strain your neck, trying to just create more stability in the scapula because it doesn't know what's going on when you're changing the load parameter from toward your center of mass and then again away from your center of mass. Yeah. So it's all about creating harmony and balance and calm balance in the body. So if you are walking and you feel like you're just dragging through mud, or it's a chore just to have your normal gait going through, a simple strategy of precise type of stretching, not just stretching, but also with the right type of intention, knowing where to create compression, where to create stretch, and also very important, like I mentioned before, diaphragmatic breathing, deep diaphragmatic breathing. Once the diaphragm is a bit more relaxed, and the best way to relax the diaphragm is to stretch the body in a contralateral fashion and to breathe deeply. Really concentrate on that deep breath work in through the nose, into the chest, and out. Breathe out through your feet. Like visualize that you're inhaling and exhaling down. And the diaphragm, you do that for 24 minutes, and it makes all the difference, particularly on days where you might have excessive amount of DOMs come through training, and you just feel like really bound and rigid to yourself. 24 minutes of those stretches incorporating with diaphragmatic breathing just really reduces that sympathetic dominance that your body might be going through. And it's funny we mentioned this. Another client of mine, his name is Vergus. He actually he did his blood sugar readings in the morning. And his blood sugar readings came out about 5.7. And then directly after doing the blood sugar reading, without eating anything or taking any supplements, he just incorporated the stretching drill that I gave him with diaphragmatic breathing, as well as the positions. After having done that for 24 minutes, it dropped down to 4.7. Okay. Wow. It shows you the power of oxygen exchange, firstly, as well as the power of just being able to take oxygen and also create more circulation and relaxation to the tissue. I think a lot of people are focused on how much hard they can contract the muscle, but not enough attention has gone into how much they can relax the muscle after contracting it. And a muscle is only beneficial to you as much as you can stretch it. You can't stretch a muscle actively. And I'm not talking just about, everyone goes on about full range of motion. And I have a bit of a problem with that because full range of motion is great if you have active control to that full range of motion. But if you're just dropping, like you see it in the squat, you see it in the bench press, if you're just dropping your bum to the floor, without considering where the position of your spine is, where the pelvis is, if it's tucking underneath or if it's keeping in a nice stable position, allowing the femur to do the work rather than the lumbar spine and all the ligaments in the sacroiliac joint, then you're just setting yourself up for more hypertonicity. All right, so active range control goes a long way of creating a stretch reflex reaction in the body. So I don't know if you're aware of what that means, a stretch reflex reaction.
No, it's not familiar with me previously. No.
Okay, so stretch reflex reaction basically works with the muscles and the tendons. And what happens is when you actively able to contract and relax a tissue within its active range through control. And when I say control, without strain, all right, so not massive strain, what happens is the tissue becomes a little bit less hyper-responsive and a little bit more relaxed. You have greater active range come through it and coupling more balance signals from the muscle to the brain and from the brain back down to the muscle again. And you can do this if you incorporate an active range of motion into your exercise regime rather than just dropping down into the squat or dropping their bar to your chest, not considering exactly where the internal or external rotation capacity is happening in your shoulder. So that's why tempo training is so beneficial for the preservation of your body for the long run, because you have to be under complete awareness and control of how you're shifting weight, rather than letting weight just shift you. And weight will just shift you. Like the forces of gravity, particularly when you have an increased amount of load and increased amount of momentum into your movement, gravity will pull you into that full range, but it's not necessarily going to be the best full range possible because the stabilizing components may be switched off and you may be utilizing more connective tissue to create a rebound or a negative stretch reflex reaction to the detriment of your tissue, muscle tissue in the long run, and particularly to your joints. You can see it often, time and time again, in guys who are lifting 300 plus kilos that don't have good form. There are guys out there really, really strong, have fantastic form, lifting these crazy amounts of weights, and I have a high amount of respect for these superhumans. But a lot of guys out there that embark on powerlifting or even bodybuilding, they don't necessarily take into account their control, particularly in the stretch phase of any movement. And what comes from that is, you'll get away with it. You may get away with it for a year, 10 years. But eventually, as you can notice with a lot of professional bodybuilders, particularly of the new generation of big mass monsters, you can have issues with your spine. And that's not fun. I mean, I'm sure you can name a few bodybuilders in your hand that have gone for some type of reconstructive surgery, hernia surgery, just to name a few, let alone the knees and the ankles, everything else, just around the spinal column. And as soon as you start to create damage around the spinal column, the knees, the ankles, hips, to a certain point, you can really come back from an injury or from a strain. But once the spine starts to go into serious damage, or even marginal damage, it's extremely difficult to get the body back into a state of equal balance or optimal balance. Because there are regulatory type of receptors around our spine and rib cage that give us that optimal control to our body. So when we disrupt these receptors, it causes havoc. It really does. So although exercise can be beneficial, it can be extremely detrimental if it's not done with good intention. So a take home for us is prepare your body for exercise. So when you get in the gym and you find it hard to get into a squat position, a lot of people are against stretching before exercise. They say there's no benefit to it, or they say it relaxes the muscle, switches the muscle off. Yes, it actually does switch the muscle off to a certain extent, but it's not necessarily to your detriment. Sometimes an overactive muscle that has a subdued amount of activity coming to it is to the benefit of a more complete and controlled motion from better muscle contraction and optimal and subsequently muscle growth or hypertrophy.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. That is, an eye-opener. I've got a bit of soft tissue work going on tomorrow. I've got 45 minutes with someone. Looking at my, you've seen my pictures and I've mentioned a few of my issues. Anything that you reckon I should get into particularly look at? I mean, I've got a shoulder injury. I think it's shoulder impingement. I can't, whenever I try and press, chest press or overhead press anywhere from this sort of direction, it really gives me grief. In my rear delt area on my right, coming through into my front delt, that's where I'm going to tell him to look at and work on. That's what I did last week. But
no, I would disagree. I would disagree. The reason why you feel strain in these areas is because the muscle has been overstretched. All right. So,
okay.
if looking at your photos and looking at the anatomic, well, putting your photos in a little software program I have that assesses angles within the biomechanics. It seems as though you have a little bit of a wing scapula, not excessive.
Yeah, very much.
Scapula. Now, generally with a wing scapula, there are a few tissues that can cause this issue to arise. Namely, however, is the subscapularis, which is a muscle just underneath the scapula. So, and then in addition to that, things like the pectoral minor, as well as the bicep too. The bicep, particularly in the bicep tendon, up underneath the shoulder itself, in the point of origin. So, I wouldn't say this tissue here is being strained because it's being excessively stretched, because the tissue in the front of your shoulder and underneath your shoulder blade is excessively toned. So in order to alleviate tension here by an overstretch, we release tension in the pec minor, as well as the pec major and the bicep tendon area, and then going
so bicep and the pec. I'll get into
Polaris.
Okay, cool. All right, I'll get him to do that then, because that's where the pain is, and it's been relieved since my last session with him, and he did stretch out my pec. He's a pretty good guy, to be honest, and the pain has sort of gone by about 80% as I walk around. But this is a problem I've had for about 2 years. It will come back. It's like, but it relieved it for now. But it is there, and it's quite preventative during sessions as well, when I'm training. But obviously, the wing scapula I've always had as well. You
can get rid of it, but your wing scapula is also once again coming from a displaced position in the spine. And now that you're on the gut protocol, I don't know if you noticed, but from your first picture to your second picture, well, the second lot of pictures, particularly today, you notice where your abs have become.
Yeah.
Not because you've lost an abundance of body fat in a week, although I'm sure you've lost some. It's to do with the fact that your mechanics are improving because you haven't got as much inflammation occurring in the small intestinal tract.
Yeah.
So because the small intestine is not so blown out and pulling your spine over into itself, the spine is relaxing and the abs are extending. Now, can you imagine? Now, so the shoulder blade's on the back here, right?
Yeah.
And our abs are here. So when the abs are crunched over, the shoulder blade will pull up and over.
Uh-huh.
When we address gastrointestinal issues, all of a sudden we get a lengthening effect here, and the shoulders come back into a nice neutral position. So you'll find that you can cope with this, and you can actually probably alleviate your symptoms to bare minimum, so long as you start to work on your internal health, which is what we're doing now. And then,
sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, my wing scapulars are something that really bother me, the way they look, and it kind of concerns me that when I step on stage next year, real low bodies of level fat, well, as low as I can hope to get. How that will look with like wing scapulars. Well, I struggle to even. Funnily enough, I struggle to contract my left lat as well, or like in a lat spread, I struggle to not contract it, struggle to spread it. In a lat spread, it seems to like tuck up under my armpit. If you're looking at it from face on view, it's frustrating. But my right is the same, but they're both winged. It's kind of like something.
Exactly that. So the words that you used there were under your armpits, right? And that muscle which I'm referring to right now, the subscapularis, is exactly where it is. It's basically the scapula and armpit. So if you're trying to do a lat spread and get your lats out, there's something restricting there. That's what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen to your lats. Once you open up the subscapularis and you're free of tension, scalenes, the pec minor, and the bicep, you get that extra pop coming out of your
That's exactly how it looks. So what you just did there. So I'll be spread, but my left hand side will be tucked up in.
Yeah, it's like basically causing counter strain in your body, not allowing you to get that optimal stretch of the lat, because the lat spread is like flaring and opening the lats as much as you can. Yeah. But so the lats also work as extensors, but as well as medial rotators in the end range of their motion. Now, if your medial rotator is tight, and if you do a lat spread, you're almost in a medially rotated position for the lat, not a laterally rotated position. So over here, you're more in a laterally rotated position. As you come down, so now you're doing a straight on pull down, that'll be more lateral. As you're coming through, you become more medial in the shoulder rotation. All right. Now, in this position, we're doing a lat spread. You're in a medially rotated position already. But if the synergist to the lats, which can be the subscapularis in certain phases of movements, is tight, it's not going to allow the lats to stretch or to show your muscular development. Now, it's very important to note, though, that a local issue around the shoulder, you're dealing with the symptom of freeing of the subscapularis might be all good and well. But more importantly, the fact that you mentioned that your feet are pressed out like a pigeon foot might be a sign that we need to free off tension in the hip. So when you go and see your therapist tomorrow, is it more your right side or your left side that's a problem?
My right shoulder's the problem. Okay, right. But at the moment, I don't want to open another can of worms because we're on a time budget. But at the moment, I've got like a pain that I can't really locate. It feels like a nerval pain on my left outer, like femoral cutaneous.
That's what I was going to go to. So more than likely, what's happening is your femur on your left side of your hip is probably in a state of slight internal rotation because the adductors are holding on for dear life. Because your external rotators, namely probably the piriformis amongst the other group of external rotators. I always remember the external rotators in hip as PGOGO Q. Piriformis, obturator, externus, gemellus, and superior, obturator, internus, gemellus, inferior, and quadratus femoris. So PGOGO Q, right? Now, those are normally a little bit... Don't worry about that. I just thought I always thought it was funny. PGOGO Q, right? These things you remember when you're studying. Now, those tissues are tight. What's going to happen is the tighter those are, eventually they become hypertonic. It doesn't mean that they are overly accessible and contractile potential. It means actually more limited to the range of contraction they can have. And generally, the more limited that your external rotators are, this being the base of the coccyx up to your iliac crest, or to the femur through the crest. Generally, what's going to happen is the tissue above that, being the glutes, and this tissue over here will be the glute medius. It's going to switch off. Now, when this switches off, the little muscle in front of it, TFL, will switch on, which is normally, if you press into the side of your hip, it's probably a little tender, because that's a small muscle doing a job of a bigger muscle. And then what happens is the body says, oh no, we can't keep doing this. This poor TFL is going to completely cop out. So what happens is it tightens up your adductor magnus, which is on the inside of your thigh. So if you just do now, if you take your right hand and you just press the inside of your thigh on your left leg, tell me if it feels tense to you, where the adductors are.
Yeah.
Okay. So what you want to do when you go see your therapist is have your therapist first work on your adductors. Then once they've worked on your adductors, particularly the adductor magnus, all right, so have to be the anterior and the posterior fibers of that muscle, then have them work on adductor magnus in particular. But more than likely, the entire adductor group will be tonic, but particularly the adductor magnus. Once your therapist has worked on the adductor magnus, get them then to work on the external rotators of your left hip. But just remember, when it comes to a good massage therapist, sports massage therapist, or good therapist all around, regardless if it's a physio, it's a fitness therapist, an osteo, whatever it is, when you treat one side, you always treat the other side, even if there aren't any symptoms to that side. But you always treat the affected side first and then the non-affected side thereafter, because the tissue will have a readjustment. And there might be tension on the other side you're not aware of, and if you just leave it there, it's eventually going to get so tense, it's going to shift the tension again to the other side.
Yeah.
So have your therapist work on your adductor magnus, external rotator, and then have them do the same thing on the right leg. And then work on the left. So left leg first, right leg second, right arm first, left arm second. And the muscles you need to work on, particularly, if you want to write this down, then, are the adductor magnus and the external rotators of the hip.
Yeah.
And for the shoulder group, the subscapularis first. Right. The scalenes second.
Scalene second. Yeah.
The pectoral minor third,
Pec minor, third.
and lastly, the bicep, brachii.
Biceps, would you say brachii?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that. That's brilliant, because I'm going now and paying him the money. I may as well be optimal with the session, especially with how I feel. Training at the moment, as good as I feel, day to day, training's quite an unsatisfying feeling. Like contractions feel a bit shit. Sorry, like I think it's related to the high fat, low carb diet. That's just what I get the impression of when I'm low on carbs. That's just how it feels. But I'm feeling well enough to actually feel motivated to get to the gym. Go back 2 weeks when I was feeling groggy, lethargic. I weren't even turning up at the gym, So
look, I think like one thing about muscle contraction, and when you're going through a detox. So the moment we're trying to get you guys, we're on a non-nightshade, high-fat, low-carb diet. Not no carb, just lower carbs. So you have a little bit of carbs in the evening from the sources that exclude nightshades. When you go through this, as well as utilizing the certain supplements, which I've advocated for you guys to use, and you start to kill off unwanted bacteria, or you starve unwanted bacteria. Just remember, bacteria has its own metabolic cycle. So when they start to become starved and eventually die, hopefully, they release toxins into the body. And that's why the body goes through initial transition of detoxification, because trying to get rid of all these toxins that the bacteria is releasing, probably more so than it normally would, but for a short while, for the benefit of your body in the long run. That's also why your energy is slowly coming up, even though your contraction is not as good as it should be. Your energy is coming up because you're getting less of that bacterial overgrowth occurring, which means you have more nutrients being absorbed into the body and made available for all your body processes, particularly energy production and ATP synthesis.
Okay. Yeah, good. Something's working because I feel great. I feel great.
Very important to note that, Ben, once your therapist has finished freed off these tissues, you need to activate them. Okay, by body weight movements. You don't have to go putting a weight on your back and doing anything crazy, but you need to activate them. So, for example, if you're going to free off the subscapularis and all the other tissues, which I just mentioned to you a second ago, doing just a body weight with no weight in your hand, an active trap 3 raise, laying on the floor, just literally trying to suppress the shoulders, so depress the shoulders, and then flex the arms. Just just nice and easy and gentle, and it shouldn't be. You shouldn't have to go. If you're going like that to try and get your arms off, he hasn't done a very good job in releasing the tension, particularly in the subscapularis. So you should be able to lie face down on the floor, belly nice and flat, core pulled in, not down, and then be able to drop shoulders and flex the arm without any compensation occurring in your lower back. If he's done a good job, then you'll notice that they will all be back on point.
Sound okay.
All right, but you want to activate it. And the same thing with the legs. Things like prisoner lunges are fantastic for the outside of the hip. Things like airplanes, also really good in actively contracting the external rotators of the hip, as well as getting active extension of them during internal rotation. So Stuart McGill airplanes, it's a really good movement to do. You can do it supported. You can't do it freestanding, which I wouldn't recommend if you are tight in the hip to go for straight. But remember, like a lot of people are now also into gymnastics and a lot of cool movements, a lot of calisthenic-based movements, and they're great if they have, once again, active control. But if you're unstable trying to perform them, make the exercise easier. Give yourself a bit more of a support structure to allow the muscle to engage in control and awareness, and then gradually move to a freestanding McGill airplane as an example.
Okay. One more thing, and you can make it a quick answer if you like, which is fine because we're on a time budget. I'm so tight. My fascia is so tight in my lower legs, like my anterior lower legs on the front of my shins, and in my ankles when I sort of like do a like a dorsiflexion. When I do that, when I do one of the stretches, the one where you're on your knees and you bend back.
Yes.
Pain in my ankles make me give out before the minute's up, like more often than not. So shall I get him to work on that fascia tomorrow or not bother?
No, you know what? It's going to be it's an ongoing active involvement on your part that's going to alleviate the tension there. So generally, when you have tight fascia in the lower leg, around the calves and the shins, it's generally due to poor circulation. Okay.
Yeah, it feels like that.
And
I gave up playing football because I get 10, 15 minutes into a game and I can't feel my feet anymore. So it feels like poor circulation. I even broke my foot last year, Justin, 18 months ago. I broke my foot, my outer metatarsal, and I felt something pop, but I didn't feel any pain in it. And I carried on playing for half an hour more. So I've got really, really bad tightness and circulation going in that lower leg into my feet. Really poor.
so the best strategy I can give you, and I've suffered from this, my family has, we're very tall people in my family, and we've suffered from poor circulation to the lower leg. It's hereditary as well for me, as well as partly in the past being dietary with too much sugar and everything else. So the first thing is obviously have a good diet, which will help, less blood sugar, better circulation, but more of a direct plan of attack or plan of action, not attack, action. We don't want to attack them anymore. Is just to be gentle to them. So how we do that? Use a lacrosse ball or a hockey ball, and you roll out your plantar fascia. So you roll it out longitudinally and horizontally. Never roll your feet from the heel to the toe. Always roll the ball from the toe to the heel with pressure. So once you get to the heel, alleviate the pressure, reposition the ball closer to the toes, and then roll the fascia again.
Oh, okay, because I have done that before, but I didn't know that part of it.
So that will loosen off the plantar fascia, which has massive effect to the lower leg. That's the first call of action. The second call of action, what you could do, which helps a hell of a lot, is take a topical magnesium. Poliquin Institute probably has the best one that I've tried. I've tried many, but theirs is probably also the most expensive, but it works the best out of all of them. Topical magnesium, and you put it on your legs before going to bed.
What are you calling that? Topical magnesium?
Topical, topical because you put it on your skin. Yeah. So it's a transdermal solution.
And rub that on my leg, yeah? And so you said it's the most expensive ones, but what is it? What's the product name? Topical magnesium, transdermal.
Yeah, it's from Poliquin Nutrition. I think it's called Topical Mag. I think that's all to name it. But it's from Poliquin Nutrition. It's really good.
Yeah, we'll give that a try as well, mate, because it is an issue.
Take a step further. Before training, there's a product from I think it's MPH. That's called Vasoburn. It's a capsicum based topical solution. So it basically allows massive amounts of vasodilation into the tissue. They say it helps fat burning. Okay, I mean, indirectly it could, because it increases circulation. Obviously, more circulation, activity of hormone sensitive lipase and all those enzymes that can be activated through training, not by itself. But what it really does, it burns, especially if you're not used to it. The first 3 times you put it on, it really burns. But I'll tell you what, once you've gone into about 5 or 6 minutes into it, the burning sensation kind of settles enough for you to be able to actively exercise. And the training sessions you get in terms of alleviating tension in your ankles and your knees is 10 times better. I really, really swear by that product. When I start to get tension around my knees, because I don't have so much tension on my knees anymore. I used to have terrible knee pain when I was younger. But as I've gotten older and be a bit more wiser with hip mobility and everything else, I have less tension in the knees. But the days in which I do feel a bit rigid around my spine and my pelvis, I do the mobility drills, pre-workout, which I've sent you a mobility drill as well. And then before doing the mobility drill, I generally put this Vasoburn on the thighs and on the calves around the knee. So around the knee, calves, and on the front of the thigh. And that really helps us promote a bit more circulation, a bit more oxygen, in essence, to the tissue, and alleviates all that tension. It really works. It's about, if you go on their site, they normally have discounts, offers on it, but you pay between 35 and 50 pounds for a tube of it. The tube can last you quite a long time because you don't have to use it every time you train legs. You use it as and when you feel there's a restriction of movement. Don't use it as, like, I'll be honest, it works really well as a preemptive workout product for better muscle contraction. So great for bodybuilders. For fat burning, my personal opinion, there's a lot of contradictive evidence against what I'm about to say. I don't think it works for fat burning at all. I think the diet works for fat burning, and good movement works for fat burning. But then again, it promotes better movement, so it does work for fat burning indirectly. But if you really want better movement, it's a great product.
Okay, great. Appreciate all that, mate. It's been a really valuable call today.
You're welcome. My pleasure. My absolute pleasure. Ben, thanks so much for your time. We'll do a follow-up call again next week. And what would you like to talk about next week round?
Well, it depends on how my week goes. I mean,
let's play it by ear then, Ben. Let's play it by ear, because I think I would like you to really be aware this week on how your sleep is, how your digestion is going, and how your muscle contraction is occurring during the workout plans I've given you. And then try, whilst having that in the back of your mind, try to come up with some questions that you feel might be pertaining to the whole process itself.
Okay.
Fantastic. Ben, thanks so much for your time, and I'll speak to you next week.